Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Gemini pre-full moon webinar. And reminding, of course, that tomorrow night at 7:44 GMT, or Universal Time, we will begin our exact full moon service meditation broadcast. Tuya will be leading that, and the full moon comes in at 9:14 and 21 seconds that Saturday night. Okay, so it'll be a little later here in Finland, 3 hours later or so. And I wonder, Joe or Brett or BL, if you'd be willing to put into the chat box the link for that.
It's already there.
Oh, you're good. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. I was going to do that and I didn't quite get there. So, friends, we've been working with the three keynotes for that precede the Gemini full moon. And the keynote of love, true love, so associated with that sign in which duality is not only presented but overcome. And then we have resurrection, associated interestingly with the seventh initiation. We oftentimes think that after the crucifixion there is resurrection, and there is of a kind. But the true resurrection is to rise above the cosmic physical plane in consciousness. You're not yet fully focused on what's called the cosmic astral plane. That comes later, but at least in terms of detachment from the cosmic physical plane, that is a type of resurrection, and that comes in at an initiation we can barely conceive, and through which the Christ is passing and through which the Buddha is passing. And that is the seventh initiation, lying, I'm sure, thousands and thousands of years ahead for such as we are. And then last night we dealt with contact, true spiritual contact with the inner and higher forces via the Antakarana, the Rainbow Bridge. Gemini and its best-known ruler, Mercury, are so associated with the building of the Antakarana, whereby we can reach into the realms of life and being and the true soul, which is the spiritual triad. So this is really an amazing sign. It's a sign that exoteric astrology interprets mostly in terms of intelligence and the mind, but that's rather the lower level of it. Of course, it is always an intelligent sign, but the relation of the pairs of opposites, the zodiacal energies which Gemini unites, standing as it does between each of the opposing zodiacal signs, that is the main point, the union into unity of the apparently opposite poles. And we, as human beings, we have that issue ourselves, because sometimes we are very much the personality, and sometimes we realize that there is a higher pair of opposites and higher of the pair, and that is the soul nature, and we try to unite them using the light and speed of Gemini. And later, when we become the soul-infused personality, we seek to see that united with our spirit aspect, or monad, and then Jupiter comes into play, and we manage to unite spirit and the soul-infused personality, or in a way we might call it spirit and matter. Here in this Gemini banner, we see the three rulers of Gemini, the ever-present Mercury, most associated with this sign in exoteric astrology, and then Venus, interestingly enough, and Mercury and Venus make a pair. Venus is the esoteric ruler, and then what we see down here is part of the glyph of the Earth. And without Gemini, I think, Gemini is very much involved in the redemption of the Earth and rendering it into a sacred planet. If you really look at a kind of a triangle between Gemini, Venus, and the Earth, we see the method of the sacredization of our planet. The real mantra is I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self I grow and glow. I got so used to setting this mantra to music, and the word see was easier than recognize, so I said I see my other self, and in the waning of that self I grow and glow. But there is something about suddenly realizing that you are not what you thought you were. So you begin to recognize, as if from a detached distance, the self that you thought you were, and you realize, in fact, that you are a different and observing self, that you are the soul. So you stand apart from the lower self instead of identified as the lower self, and that has to be a great moment in consciousness, I think, for many people. They say, wait a second, I'm not what I thought I was, and I'm standing apart, so therefore, what am I? And then we have indeed the possibility of seeing ourselves, or realizing ourselves, I should use the word realization, as a type of higher self. And eventually that will also occur as we identify as the monad, and we will recognize our soul-infused personality, and we will recognize that it is not our truer self, but that the monad is indeed our truer self. So you can expand this mantra as we rise into higher and higher states of identification. This interesting Jafra illustration is very rich in symbolism. There's a lot of complexity in the sign Gemini. You know, if you go into the labors of Hercules, there are actually 5 different tests that the disciple in Gemini must undergo. And it's all about eventually true service, the serving of one's brother, and then finally the serving of the one. And here we see the opposites represented as male and female, and as the sun and the moon, and as the 2 pillars of wisdom. And finally, at the very top of the whole illustration, we see a kind of divine hermaphrodite. You know, it's the blending of Hermes, which is Mercury, and of Aphrodite, which is Venus. We even see down here the lion and the unicorn. Actually, I think in a way the way this is set up, the lion, strangely enough, even though it rules Leo, should be on the left-hand side and the unicorn on the right-hand side, because the unicorn represents the soul. And as Tuya was saying earlier today in one of her broadcasts, the baboon represents the true disciple and is associated with Sagittarius, the opposite sign, and is contemplating the globe. The baboon, I think, is the one who is dropping the feather, and if your heart is heavier than a feather, well, you just go right back into incarnation. The so-called crocodile eats the heart, which is the symbol of incarnation. Here we have the caduceus in the very center, and this is a symbol for the kundalini and for the type of liberation that one achieves when the 2 energies, the Ida and Pingala, meet at the higher parts of a human being's internal anatomy, internal energy system, and that gives you the winged flight of the 4th initiation. You earn your wings by that time, so to speak. And interestingly, Mercury is very much associated with the 4th initiation. You wouldn't think so necessarily, but Saturn and Mercury make that discriminative judgment between what is real and what is unreal, and everything in the lower worlds, the lower 18 subplanes, even the lower 21 subplanes, is just a bit unreal. So we go into the cosmic ethers, and that's where reality begins on the cosmic physical plane, and that has a lot to do with Gemini. Whatever connects with the etheric body, we find Gemini. We also find the sign Aquarius. So we have to, on our Earth, become what is called the adjudicators, the ones who judge between the pairs of opposites, and we really know the difference between them. And by the method of pain, I guess, because we are from that planet of purifying pain and releasing sorrow, so through the method of pain and sorrow, we learn the difference between the pairs of opposites, between our higher self and our lower self, and hopefully we're on our way doing that, and as we enter the fifth kingdom of nature, we very much learn that lesson, and hopefully, since the first initiation is immediately ahead of humanity, hopefully people such as ourselves will be close to that first initiation or having taken it, and will be entering into the fifth kingdom of nature, which Gemini has so much to do with. I think without Gemini, really, there would not have been that graduation of animal man into the fourth kingdom of nature, and then later the graduation of the human being into the fifth kingdom of nature, the kingdom of souls. Now, Francis has offered us here some interesting images. Here is one that's called the freedom of the two. We'll read a little bit about that, but you can see that one image represents the soul and the other represents the personality. And here is, let's see, just got to find this thing. The group Antikarana, that's another one he's given us. It gives a picture of the Antikarana in relation to a sphere, and it is a sphere maybe 20-sided, I think. Is it the icosahedron? I'm not sure. He's the sacred geometer here. But the six-pointed star is in the center, and there we have another image for the monad, and it is also an image for Gemini when the different opposites are united. So when you think of the Antikarana, you might not only think of going upward in the cone-like transformation towards the monad, but you might think about going inward as well. And here is another of the images. I recognize my other self. You see the line of eyes coming from, let's say, the star Pollux, which is a supergiant star and represents the soul. And there is a recognition of this lower self through this line of eyes, and that is Castor. Interestingly enough, Castor is not just one star, it is actually 6 stars, or 6 doubles of all things. I think that's very interesting because Gemini has so much to do with duality. So you have 3 pairs, which fits very well. And when you look at the image of the cosmic physical plane, you can separate the 7 planes into a topmost plane, which we might consider the Castor plane, and then 3 doubles, which would be Atma and Buddhi, excuse me, the monadic plane and Atma, and then the Buddhi and Manas, and then the astral plane and the etheric physical plane. 3 doubles. So it's a 1 and a 6 that we're actually dealing with, and it's very symbolic of our own nature. Let's see some of the things that Francis has written about these. Okay, let's see. The first one would be, let's see if I can get that. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite hold enough. The Castor and Pollux, there we go. So this is the image that has to do with the source of light, which is Pollux, and the recognition of the lower self. And he quotes from White Magic, the solar angel, in this case identified with Pollux, collects himself, scatters not his force, but in meditation deep communicates with his reflection. And we, in our usual personality nature, are the reflection of this higher being who was once a human being in a previous solar system, the solar angel. When the shadow, Castor, has responded, in meditation deep the work proceedeth, the lower light is thrown upward, and the greater light illuminates the 3, that is the threefold personality, and the work of the 4 proceedeth. So this is the magical process, the very first rule of the 15 rules in White Magic, having a lot to do with Gemini. This is, if you think of the magician in the tarot deck, it's usually associated with Mercury, but through Mercury immediately with the sign Gemini, and one hand is held aloft and the other hand is held below, and thus the great chain of hierarchy is preserved, serving and being served. The secret doctrine tells us the legend of Castor and Pollux is concerned with the mortal half of man, the personality, and the immortal part, the ego or spiritual individual. The true ego is, we realize, the spiritual triad, and that's really something to ponder. And the ego or spiritual individual, this is Pollux, while Castor represents the personal mortal man, an animal of not even a superior kind when unlinked from the divine individuality. Blavatsky has an amazing way of restoring a degree of humility to man, who seems to be rather proud of his status, but Blavatsky sees it from a higher point of view. We're into the Festival of the Christ, is what it's called, or the Festival of Humanity, and also a World Invocation Day coming right up. And this is the day in which the great invocation should be constantly sounded by disciples aloud in the various places they may find themselves, and really create a great invocative vortex to call down the energies which we need, the energies of this tremendous mantram of power and light, the great invocation. So what is said here, what DK writes, the first things which the Christ will do, he being so associated with Gemini, beginning with this full moon of June, because he was active at the time that this was being written, and he was the commander of the forces of light, the commander of the armies of light, and who knows what the Buddha and the Christ did on their very high 7th degree initiate level to help the forces of light prevail over the tremendous onslaught of the forces of darkness at that time. Now, we're not done yet, we have a third world war being fought out on the plane of mind, and the Tibetan tells us to use mental weapons to resolve these many, many issues. I think it's even a more dangerous time than the Second World War, but the next 9 years we'll see how this unfolds. So what the Christ is doing and intended to do at that full moon, the reorganization of the world religions, so that their out-of-date theologies may be offset, in order that the churches may eventually be the recipient of spiritual inspiration. So he seems to suggest that it's not necessarily spiritual inspiration of which the churches are now the recipient. And when he speaks of the churches, he speaks of the mosques and the synagogues and all sorts of temples of worship. The old has to be thrown out, and we see how important that is now when this third world psychological war, this third world war internally, is being fought in the department of religion, of all places. So we have to be very, very careful about keeping what is good and throwing out what is no longer serving. And then further, number 2, preparation for a revelation which will inaugurate the new era and set the note for the new world religion. We desperately need the new scientific, invocatory world religion. And of course, Gemini being a great sign of invocation, but also a sign of great rationality, it will be much involved in the invocation of the higher powers in the New World religion and their subsequent evocation, we might say. To these efforts, another 2 must be added, or perhaps of even greater importance. The first one is the reaction of hierarchy itself to a new relationship established between it and Shambhala. Now, from a human point of view, we tend to think, well, our relationship with hierarchy is the most important, but from a global point of view, DK is telling us that, in fact, the relationship between hierarchy and Shambhala is even more important. And the second activity is one leading towards a much closer relation between hierarchy and humanity, and this will eventually lead to the externalization of certain of the ashrams, I guess eventually of all of them during the Aquarian Age, but there are certain that are coming out first, and certainly the great second ray ashram is the harbinger of the reappearance of the Christ and the externalization of the hierarchy, and that is under Master Kuthumu's direction. So this is the great educational effort in which so many of us are involved, and we're attempting to help humanity see things from a certain point of view, which is much larger and more spiritual and less confined and less separative. So the externalization of certain of the ashrams, and later to the appearance of the I guess, the whole hierarchy on earth, bringing in the new revelation and certainly the reappearance of the Christ. One of the things that really has always struck me is it is said that when the Christ reappears, it will be the signal that humanity has actually taken the first initiation. So this is the image we have here, and that's what we've just been talking about, and we have to learn how to be in two places at the same time. We have to learn how to be the personality and simultaneously the observing soul. We have to have that kind of flexibility, that kind of dualistic consciousness, and then of course realize that the two are really one and they will be fused together, not only through the work of Mercury, but through the work of that very magnetic planet, Venus. So very, very important in bringing the soul and personality of man together. It is our great teacher. Venus is the great teacher of the earth, and we have to learn how to use the Venusian influence in our lives, in our horoscopes, to bring the pairs of opposites together. Okay, then when we look a little further, there's this other image, very interesting. You know, the kind of sign of the Trinity is there, and the eye within the triangle, and it's obvious that one image representing the soul. And you know, if you look at this closely, you will see that this star is an 8-pointed star. And that 8-pointed star is much connected with Sirius and with Mercury. Sometimes I think that the true ruler of the Ajna Center is not so much Venus, but in a more advanced state is actually Mercury, the guardian at the 8th gate. And the eightfoldness connects with Sirius, and Sirius has been deeply connected with the Ajna Center of a higher being. So the eightness, you know, Sirius and Mercury actually go together. And it is said that Mercury is the star of Sirius. Or is it the other way around? Sirius is the star of Mercury. I think Mercury is the star. So we have the stimulation of the centers within the head of the personality. We're having here the pituitary center and the pineal center and the alta major center. And this particular triangle will, when it's activated, signify the initiate. We have here the 5-pointed star found throughout the sort of diagrams, or you say the decorations on the robe of the soul. And the 5-pointed star, of course, is the star of initiation and is also associated with this Ajna Center. So when we become true initiates, it will be the 5th ray and the Ajna Center which will be activated. Now, Venus has a lot of that 5th ray, of course. It's a 5th ray soul, but Mercury is probably a 5th ray monad. So the two of them together, Mercury and Venus, are both ruling the Ajna Center, which is the center of true initiation at the 3rd degree, when we begin to respond to the star Sirius in a truly spiritual way and not before. Let's see what is said here. Francis has a few things that are said. And got to find them. Okay, Gemini rules the hands. Thus, the spiritual hand gestures called mudras are especially relevant in this sign. And we see, of course, the soul has that gesture, which represents actually the Trinity in this case. So, Gemini also rules the etheric or vital body, making the pranic mudra, used to promote the circulation of prana in the etheric body, a quintessentially Geminian gesture. So he not only the Trinity, but the, as he says, kind of a pranic mudra is involved here. And certain of these mudras are really, really successful in making changes in our energy system. So the first and second finger indicate duality and proclaim the symbol of Gemini, while the three remaining fingers describe a circle, suggesting circulation. So there it is, and I think we could all practice that a little bit, you know, holding up our hand in this way, making the pranic mudra, and see if it makes a difference, you know, in our understanding and our feeling within the etheric body. So it's called the freedom of the two, and the soul is seen stimulating the primary triangle of centers in the mind and brain of its personality reflection by means of this mudra. So one can experiment. With regard to this triangle, the Tibetan tells us, quote, the pineal, pituitary, and carotid glands, or really maybe, glands they are, but they're also our centers connected with them, are objective correspondences to the three energy centers through which the soul controls his physical vehicle. Where the relation is close between the three glands, as is increasingly the case where disciples are concerned, a triangle of circular energies, circulating energies, is always established, and these three will make of man the true healer, who can use the etheric body at will to heal the soul through the etheric body. So that triangle has to be established before the radiation can then go forth. The presence of the monad is indicated by the triangularly enclosed eye to remind us that the soul is the vehicle, the triangle for the monad, the eye, and that in Gemini this energy can be channeled through the hands. A very interesting connection there. So we see the monad in a way in the center of the palm. It is really the all-seeing eye. It is the spirit in man. Of course, it can rise even higher as it becomes liberated onto the logoic plane. But all of us are seeking this kind of relationship with our soul, and we as souls are seeking this kind of relationship with our personality. I talked about the six-pointed star and showed that diagram, or rather illustration, about the Antakarana. Gemini is uniting each of the pairs of opposites, and it is uniting certain zodiacal triangles. Okay, so that is of interest, and but I won't get into that too much right now. 6 forces meet in Gemini. Ray 7 is apparently not present, but the pillars of Gemini represent the 7th ray in a way. 6 forces, 1 through 6, meet in Gemini, and for this reason, the double triangle is one of the subjective symbols of this sign, indicating again the essential dualism of this sign, but it is a resolution of dualities, facilitated by the true monad, which is liberated on the 7th plane. It's almost like a point within the 6-pointed star. So the star symbolizes the triangle of the soul, which is the vehicle for the threefold expression of the monad, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, overlaying the triangle of the threefold personality. This is the essential Geminian duality. Well, we talked about the 3 glands and how they are stimulated and their secretions. Actually, we have to make our own elixir, our own brain elixir. Better than any drug that can be manufactured is the brain dew or soma or elixir of life, which can be generated by the brain itself under the right spiritual influences. So I would certainly recommend that that's the kind of alchemy that we get into, and thereby transcend our physical limitations. Well, okay, here he describes the pituitary and the carotid gland, and maybe one of my colleagues can put this into our handouts or something, and you can access it if you have not already accessed what Francis has written here. Anyway, the pituitary, pineal, and carotid glands have to be active, and their corresponding centers must be active if we are going to have true soul influence within the lower man. All right. Okay, fluidity, recognition of duality, and soul control. These are the keynotes of Gemini, and should be the keynote for your life. Fluidity, recognition of duality, and soul control. For whether you are in this sign in this life, it has at some time, and many times, conditioned your experience, and the results are marked in the life of the advanced disciple. So interesting about Gemini, so many of the Tibetans' close associates were influenced by the sign Gemini. He himself was called the messenger of the masters, which is a Geminian function, also a mercurial function. Master K.H. has a prominent Gemini in his horoscope. D.K. tells us Alice Bailey was the sun in Gemini. Mary Bailey, sun in Gemini. Foster Bailey, Gemini rising. All these people with a strong Gemini helping to communicate the ageless wisdom. Okay, friends, I think that between what I've said and what Francis has written here, I think that you have a good launching point for considering the astrology of Gemini. And now we'll actually get into our meditation. Just about right. Okay, we'll get into our meditation, and this will involve the last sermon of the Buddha, variously translated, and during the last few days, Francis and I have been reading certain sections from this wonderful, inspiring sermon that the Christ sees fit to repeat at every ASALA festival, because it gives the primary foundation of what I could call a self-reliance. And if we as students of occultism and esotericism don't learn to rely upon our inner self, the true self, upon what then are we going to rely? We're going to fall into the clutches of the false teacher Bucyrus, who will promise to lead us to some sort of spiritual unfoldment, but will in fact enslave us to lesser things until we learn to break free the way Hercules broke free from Bucyrus and learn how truly to rely upon ourselves, our true inner nature. Okay, a little bit of a preamble there, and let's get into the meditation. So, this is, we'll be beginning the day of safeguarding. You know, I like to think of it as 12 hours before the full moon and 12 hours following. You know, we still have some hours before this really begins, but we are entering this stage where we're in the antechamber to this stage of safeguarding the growing energies of Gemini and its rulers. So, all of us, some 44 of us right here, right now, plus the other groups meditating at this time, and the new group of world servers, and the men and women of goodwill. It's a very, very large group in the world, and we consider ourselves to be part of all that. So we begin by withdrawing our consciousness from the personality and its vehicles, and we begin to enter deeply into the presence of the soul. We are possessed of an instrument called the etheric physical vehicle, but it is an instrument. It's not the real self. And all of our feelings, attractions, repulsions, desires, we have them. But again, not the real self. And all the many thoughts and words and concepts that are running around in our concrete mind, again, they are instrumental, but not the real self. We are, in fact, the observer. We are the soul in incarnation, the consciousness, observing consciousness in these personality fields, but we are beginning to realize that we are the observing consciousness in still higher fields of energy. For instance, the field of light, of love, of sacrificial will. These are higher fields, and we abstract ourselves imaginatively away from the customary human being into the field of the soul. Right here, right now. It exists. It's not somewhere else. It's as if our consciousness is in this field of spiritual light, spiritual love, a spiritual sacrificial power, all right here and now. And it's as if we are the observer of this field. And we are within it. And as we find ourselves within this soul space, we realize it's really a group space. It's the group soul, and we are all connected with each other, not separated, but connected with each other in a unity characteristic of the group soul. So we're all right here. We may be in Europe, in the Americas, in Australia, New Zealand, or wherever in the world, but we're all right here. In a way, there is no there, there's only a here. And we want to feel that intimacy of related consciousnesses in one consciousness. It includes all the spiritually minded people of the world, the new group of world servers, the men and women of goodwill, as if they're all right here at a point of tension together. In fact, everyone is right here. All the human beings in the body, out of the body, they're not really elsewhere at all. That's just an illusion of extension, apparent extension, when everything is really existing at a dimensionless point. So the group soul, as if, merges into the one soul of humanity, the one consciousness, and even the one being of humanity. And a very important realization: there is no my soul or thy soul, as we are told. There is only the soul. And then the secondary mantra that we should well ponder: naught is but me. So whatever you see, whoever you see, it does not escape the all-inclusive I, the all-inclusive me. You cannot escape the self. You cannot escape yourself. There are no others, really. It's a fundamental realization that occurs when the dualities are beginning to be reconciled into a unity. And in that unity, even the opposites disappear and become the one. Gemini, the service of the one. Okay. So here we are together. We are a meditating group. Other meditating groups, we are united with them. We can think together in the higher light. The will of our collective group soul stimulates our point of tension on the mental plane. with the will to initiate, the will to unify, the will to evolve, the will to harmonize, the will to act, the will to cause, and the will to express. We are stimulated by the soul, fed by the group soul with these soul aspects of the will. And as we prepare to attune ourselves to higher worlds, these aspects of the will assist us in that. Really, we're reaching into higher levels of vibration, which of course are right here, not anyplace else. It's just a question of our sensitivity. So we're going inward and in a way upward. We're going to the center of a multi-dimensional sphere, or we're rising via a cone of power, a cone of invocation and evocation, to that point of livingness within ourselves that is the true self, the point of pure being. We are rising via a bridge of light we call the Antakarana, and we're told it helps to visualize each Antakarana as composed of two colors. One the color of your soul ray, and the other the color of your personality ray. Or I would recommend simply the color indigo if we're not certain. And the colors we can use, one of the color assignments at least, is there before us. First ray red, second ray indigo blue, third ray green, fourth ray yellow, fifth ray orange, sixth ray silvery rose or light blue, seventh ray violet. There are other color assignments, some of them quite esoteric, but these will do. It's a mixture of exoteric and esoteric colors here. But imagine, as if from your mental unit and passing through that tiny monastic permanent atom, Buddhic permanent atom, atmic permanent atom, the dual-colored bridge rises towards the point of pure being, the monadic point, within the monadic vehicle, on the monadic plane. Just get the feel of your two-colored bridge. And the bridge of the entire group is 7-colored. All the colors that we're using are represented. And we can imagine the cone, if we will, or if you like, go to the center of your sphere. But this ascent is achieved through projection, we call it. And a shaft of pure white light will rise, travel across the bridge. This is our pictorial, symbolic representation of an inner occult fact. Each of us will make a line of projection into our highest aspect and through the spiritual triad. So how we do this, we sound the Om outwardly on one of the second ray notes, a G, and inwardly we use the second ray word of power. I see the greatest light. And of course for us at this time it's the unfettered enlightenment of Shambhala, of the monad. It's that great light of the spirit. So we will project together in our imaginations and outwardly sound the Om, and inwardly we hear ourselves saying, I see the greatest light. Thus, we have imaginatively built the bridge of light and the group sevenfold bridge of light and the power and wisdom, intelligence, love of the higher worlds then is free to descend into our group consciousness and bring those powers and that light to us. What we've done is we've penetrated into the world where the masters habitually live, because they are liberated triadal consciousnesses. And for us this is at best an intermittent affair. Only as a fourth degree initiate would we be Buddhically polarized completely. So we have a ways to go. But there they are, here they are, and we assert our solidarity with their presence, with their efforts. We're offering our gratitude to them, to the masters, to the hierarchy, and also at the time of the Wesak and the Gemini festivals, we necessarily include the Buddha, who is in close cooperation with the Christ in relation to the redemption of the world. So we will offer our salutations, our solidarity, our intention to help carry out the impressions for good which we receive from these higher beings. Salutations to the Lord Buddha, the Lord of Light and Wisdom. Salutations to the Christ, the Master of all masters. Salutations to the triangle of masters with whom we work most closely, Master M, Master KH, Master DK. They have done so much to bring the ageless wisdom to humanity. Salutations to the Master M, the Master Morya, the head of all esoteric schools and organizations. Salutations to the Master Kutumi, whose ashram is most responsible at this time for preparing the way for the reappearance of the Christ. Salutations to the Master Jwal Kul, who as the messenger at this time of the hierarchy has given us the blue books, and also the work with Blavatsky, and also work to come in just another 9 or 10 years. Salutations to your own Master as you know him to be or conceive him to be. Salutations to the spiritual hierarchy of our planet. So we have declared our solidarity with these higher beings who are the graduates of the human kingdom, as we will one day be, and in whose hands lies so much of the destiny of our planet and of humanity. And we raise our thought through the imagination to Shambhala, however we may conceive that, the center where the will of God is known, and with deepest reverence and in all humility, we attempt, identified as a group soul, to attune with the presence of Sanat Kumara, the great savior, the great teacher of our planet, standing as he does at the center of Shambhala. And a long, silent inner Om in this attunement. one day, of course, each one of us will either individually or increasingly in groups face not only the Christ, who is the initiator of the first 2 degrees, but the great King, beginning at the 3rd degree, appearing as a star, at the 4th degree, appearing as an eye, at the 5th degree, face to face. So we seek to respond to the purpose which floods the world through his consciousness, through his presence, helping us become agents in our own small sphere of that purpose. And on the golden beam of light which enters the indigo sphere, we come together as a point of light, love, and power, and we travel with the shortening beam of golden light into the indigo sphere, where we now imagine ourselves to be. We are within the indigo. It is a real energy, and in this indigo sphere we meet, as it were, the consciousness of Master DK, who guides us as we come en rapport with the higher planetary and solar and zodiacal energies. We're going to gain access to the Mercurian energies, very much present, representing the pairs of opposites and their fluid interplay. All things are related. Mercury helps us understand this. And all opposites will come together. Mercury is a 4th ray planet from one perspective. And we're going to attune with Venus, the esoteric ruler, whose magnetism really brings these opposites together into a symbolic and even spiritually accurate marriage. Venus, though 5th ray, has a very strong 6th and 2nd ray, thus facilitating union. We need now in our planet, on our planet, the Venusian energy so very much, the higher aspects of it. And we'll attune to our own planet, the hierarchical ruler of Gemini. It is, at this time, our field of service. And with these energies we attempt to redeem the conditions with which we are confronted so that they become more and more attuned to the divine pattern. Gemini, Venus, and the Earth. Quite a triangle, really, of mind, divine emotion, and the physical, etheric action. So these beams are available to us now, and we can attune with them perhaps better now than at other times of the year, though they are repeated in different signs in different ways. But it's all within the solar sphere of love, wisdom. Our great solar logos in whom we are monadically focused is beaming out its love wisdom as a great heart center in a still greater logos. We're in that field of love and wisdom everywhere in our solar system, and we are eventually, as planetary, or rather solar beings, well, planetary too, because we have a love wisdom soul on our planet, but we are meant to be agents of love wisdom, beings of love wisdom. That's our goal, whatever our other rays may be. So the great blue logos is shining forth his synthetic indigo nature, and we are all part of that. Let us never forget, we are essentially solar beings. And at the great seventh initiation, the love wisdom initiation, having so much to do with Gemini, we will realize our solarity in a greater way. And supported by the consciousness of Master DK, as if we rise in imagination towards the constellation Gemini, each zodiacal constellation radiating a certain type of light, and for Gemini, the light of interplay. There's no way to get the universe back together from its emanated state except through interplay. So this is a line of light beams revealing that which opposes, or the basic duality of manifestation, the relationship of spirit and of form. And then this beautiful thought, it is the conscious light of that relationship. Conscious light. The soul is light, the soul is consciousness, conscious light. We really, under Gemini, will understand the interconnectedness of all things. So we open ourselves to this quality of Gemini. A great illuminating, fusing energy. Carrying especially the second ray of love wisdom. Love wisdom through Gemini. The forces of reconstructing our world, the forces of reconstruction working through Gemini, rebuilding human civilization and the planet according to the plan, indicated by the Aretian, the Aries forces of restoration, and illumined by the forces of enlightenment through Taurus. We have the archetype. We have the light which reveals what we must do, and we have the ability to do it, putting all the pieces together through the forces of reconstruction. Gemini putting together in a way the many pieces of the divided Osiris. From out the many fragments are restored the one through Gemini. So then what does it mean to us when we think of that beautiful oblong square constellation? What does it mean to us when we say, I recognize my other self And in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. One can see the personality at a distance, as if at a distance. And then who am I? I, the one who recognizes that something at a distance. That which you are cannot be held by the form which you see or recognize. It's a very transient form, the temporary home of that which you are, but not the real home. Get the feeling of who it is that is recognizing what you used to think you were. I recognize my other self. And in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. So whatever image you had of yourself as a personality in the world, it is expendable. And that which is observing it, with its form, its feelings, its thoughts, the observer is much more real. And is ultimately the spirit itself, the true observer of all that is apparently not itself. I recognize my other self. And in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. So hold that in your consciousness and build it up over the next almost 24 hours. So that when the moment of the full moon comes, this great mantram really means something to us. There seem to be many observers, but really there's only one observer. just as there is only one soul, the observer of many instruments, but there's only one observer. And the I that is liberated from its identification with the personality slowly fuses into that one, that oneness. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. Of course, the great Lord, Lord Maitreya, he knows these things intimately, as does the Buddha, our two great teachers, the brothers of the East and the West, the Buddha and the Christ, setting for us the example of the union of the opposites, the union of the hemispheres, the East and the West, and the hemispheres of the brain, and of all opposites. The two brothers are for us an embodiment of Gemini. They stand for the brothers in the light, at least here on the human scale. So it is their cooperation at this festival of goodwill, this festival of humanity, this festival of the Christ, their cooperation that is celebrated. Let's think of it. The way that's done is that the Christ preaches the last sermon of the Buddha before the assembled hierarchy, and reaching the hearts and minds of all human beings who can attune. The two are the great saviors of the race, at this time anyway, because of course they move on at a certain point and others will take their place. So our attunement as a group with them is so important at this time that we can grasp their intimate cooperation, how very necessary both of their perspectives are. The theme of the Buddha's last sermon, basically, self-reliance. We won't read all the sermon, but certain words from it. You can, maybe it'd be a good thing to do to look this up on the internet in various translations, the last sermon of the Buddha, become familiar with it. But let us imagine the Christ communing with the Buddha, the Buddha resident in Shambhala, and the Christ representing all of the upward aspiring inclinations, yearnings of humanity, and the Christ intoning his brother's last words during his last complete incarnation on this planet, at least in the lower worlds, and for the sake of all humanity. So I will read this slowly, pausing as you ponder some of the things that the Christ will be saying, we are told, in whatever language he will use. Maybe the Pali is the language to be used, but perhaps in other ways as well. So try to take this in, as if here is the Buddha preparing to make his transition. He had been sick at the age of 80. He had eaten the tainted pork that a farmer offered to him and his disciples. He wouldn't let them eat it, but nor could he refuse the gesture of the farmer. Master Morya said that this saved him from the misconception of immortality. He would have become a god, and that wouldn't do people any good, because the minute you deify a teacher, you don't think you can be as they are. But when a great teacher comes forth and they are human, then you can emulate them. You can imitate them. You can become as they are. But not so if you regard them as deities. So this saved him from that fate, says Master M. And I do imagine that Master M was among his students, gathered around him, I suspect. Anyway, these words. Those who, either now or after I am dead, shall be a lamp unto themselves, relying upon themselves only, and not relying upon any external help, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp, and seeking their salvation in the truth alone, shall not look for assistance to anyone besides themselves. Imagine that you are gathered around the dying Buddha, and he is speaking to you, to us. It is they, Ananda, among my bhikshus, disciples, who shall reach the very topmost height. But they must be anxious to learn. My age is now full ripe. My life draws to its close. I leave you. I depart, relying on myself alone. Be earnest then, O brethren, holy, full of thought. Be steadfast in resolve. Keep watch o'er your own hearts. Who wearies not, but holds fast to his truth and law, shall cross this sea of life, shall make an end of grief. When the light of gnosis has dispelled the darkness of ignorance, when all existence has been seen as without substance, peace ensues. When life draws to an end, which seems to cure a long sickness at last. Everything, whether stationary or movable, is bound to perish in the end. Be ye therefore mindful and vigilant. The time for my entry in nirvana has now arrived. These are my last words. So in the silence we enter into the spirit of the Buddha's last sermon and take it deeply to heart. And we will let these thoughts grow in our consciousness as we approach the full moon. In another approximately 22 hours. That's actually about 24 hours for the exact full moon. As if we are students of the Buddha, really, and students of the Christ, really, with a great opportunity at this time of the intensification of the initiatory process, when so many are being gathered into the fifth kingdom, we have to realize the opportunity before us. And so, with profound gratitude to the Buddha for all he has done to illumine humanity, we focus on his brother, the Christ, and we imagine that we are hearing the Christ and the assembled hierarchy sounding the entire great invocation together. And I'm pretty sure you all know it, but just in case, I will put this up so you can see it. And it is they together, the Christ and the assembled hierarchy, who in their own way are sounding the great invocation. This we imagine. And tomorrow it will be so. So let us enter into the imagination and, as if, hear them all together sounding this. powerful this must be, with the entire spiritual hierarchy sounding the invocation with the Christ. And on World Invocation Day, let us do the same. The Christ is focusing all the spiritual aspiration of humanity in his being. And as the leader of his people and the eldest in a great family of brothers, in an act of love, he's offering up that inspiration to the Buddha and to Shambhala on behalf of humanity and the planet. We can imagine the full response of the love of Shambhala. Light supernal, love eternal, peaceful, silent will. The love of Shambhala, inspired by the Solar Logos, flowing into both the hierarchy and humanity, creating a great planetary triangle through which the energies of divine solar love are circulating. The high point of love reached at the Gemini moment. And so we extend our contemplative thought towards the constellation Gemini, the head of the cosmic Christ, and the source of all that is transpiring at the time of the full moon and on World Invocation Day. And let us take our responsibility very seriously, sounding the invocation as constantly as we can, rhythmically, spirit and matter united through divine love. Streaming to us through Mercury the messenger, Venus the union of heart and mind, and upon our planet the Earth, the field of our service. We have a great responsibility coming up. And we will be, as we approach the Gemini full moon, blessing the world through the great invocation. It's our greatest instrument for facilitating the reappearance of the Christ, the great teacher and world Savior. It's our great instrument for preparing the hearts and minds of humanity for this great event. And if we could realize it, the distributing of the great invocation wherever we can, bringing it to the attention of all who may possibly benefit from its use, will facilitate the development within human consciousness which will say to the Christ, the time has arrived. We're at one of the major high points of the higher interlude, and with all these thoughts in mind, attempting to draw humanity towards the hierarchy of light, love, and power, we will sound together each in his own place, the great invocation. Keeping the alignment with the elder brothers and the alignment to Gemini and its planetary representatives of vast planetary and extraplanetary and cosmic alignment, we sound together. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. So friends, many things to think about, but a basic alignment to be held. And let's see, just like to, this is something that I should have looked up earlier, but let's just make sure. World Invocation Day 2016 and May 21st. That is tomorrow. So okay, as we build towards the full moon, we can think of the great invocation, sounding it as frequently as we can, rhythmically, out loud, with full intent, full empowerment, at a full point of tension, linking up with all the disciples in the world, the servers, the men and women of goodwill, and of course with the planetary hierarchy as we sound the great invocation. You can imagine what a potent summoning it is. Okay, so in the chat box you can see we'll be starting our exact full moon service meditation, which Tuya will lead, and it will be starting at 7:44 Universal Time or GMT. And it will go to the moment of the full moon, which will be at 9:14 and 21 seconds GMT, and a little beyond. So we hope to see as many of you there that don't have your own outer private group events for the meditation, but maybe some of you will join us, and we'd be very happy to be working with you at that time. So thank you for attending this pre-full moon webinar. It's got into a lot of the details, I realize, but give us something to think about as we move forward and prepare for the full moon, which will be occurring, well, let's just say almost 24 hours from now, 23 hours and a half or something. So we'll see you. Thank you for attending, and we'll get this out to you as soon as we can, the recording of this. All the best to everyone, and have a beautiful ASALA festival, beautiful alignment with the Gemini energies, and all success to you in the distribution of these energies over the 3 days which follow the exact full moon. It's a great time for all disciples to be inspired as messengers of the spiritual hierarchy. It's a message which needs to be heard. See you then. Bye-bye.